Daniela, thanks so much for joining me. I am a huge fan of your work, been following it for years, and it's a pleasure and privilege to host you today. So yeah, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I thought I'd break this episode into 5 parts. The first part being foundations, and within this, I labeled it the science of emotion and memory. So I think let's get started with that, and thereafter we'll move on to things like from circuits to consciousness and beyond. So the first question I have is, you've devoted your life to, and your career to studying the neural mechanisms of emotional learning and memory. Could you share perhaps how your journey from animal models of schizophrenia symptoms to human studies of fear have shaped the questions that you ask today?
Yeah, it's been a long journey. It started really from interest in the philosophy of mind and philosophy of science and psychobiology, the brain basis of behavior. That's what I studied in my undergrad. And that kind of naturally led to cognitive neuroscience. So I did start with animal models of schizophrenia, but that was an animal model of emotional learning. So it already incorporated the fear learning component. And then I switched to humans. And I can't say it was really planned. It just the way it went about. I guess I just persisted with the topics that seemed interesting to me. And it always revolved around emotion, in particularly fear.
Okay. And when you think about a fear memory and when it's first formed in the brain, what would you say is actually happening when this occurs? Let's say at a neural level, and thereafter will slowly branch out into what its repercussions have on a social level.
Yeah, so I think the most fundamental thing is the organism identifying something that is important and relevant in the environment to the organism. And that can be in many domains. So in this sense, you can put all sorts of emotions. In the case of fear, it's a threat to the survival of the organism, something threatening. So the organism is identifying that, and then the brain gets into a mode. It can be a predictive mode because it's preparatory. So it prepares the brain or the organism to address that concern.
Mm. One of your central findings is that emotional responses are flexible. So when somebody encounters something fear-driven, let's say something that leads to a post-traumatic stress type of disorder. I know you're not a psychiatrist, so just a disclaimer for everyone out there. How do you think that plasticity of the brain and reducing this, let's say, emotional, non-hardwired feeling, this doesn't make sense, but let's say the fact that it's not hardwired, how does someone then apply this from a behavioral standpoint? So, because in your work, you focus primarily on fear and the fact that it's such a formative experience, but thereafter you also work on memory and how we can change this, how malleable we are. So it's a perfect blend, I think, of these two different components and how it can change our experience of reality. Could you perhaps unpack that? Sorry, it's a bit of a long-winded question.
Yeah, no, it's something that's really fascinating that we see in the course of evolution. So it starts from reflexive responses. These are hardwired. There's just like a very narrow repertoire of responses. There's, let's say, threat or kind of predator, and then the organism has a set of responses, sometimes just like one particular response to that situation. And with evolution, we kind of evolved to first learn that, but to build on that, additional, for example, stimuli that are, as I mentioned, predictive. So now you can prepare ahead of time. No, you don't need to wait for the encounter itself. So you have these preparatory responses. And then environment is changing. So you do need to update. You move from one environment to another, conditions change. And so that's a very important capacity to flexibly modulate what is it that you learned. Because otherwise, every bad experience that you have will kind of change your life forever. And we don't want to have that. So we need that flexibility. So we have this repertoire of responses that we can modify flexibly, with time and with condition and with additional information.
Mm. Well, when I was doing my dissertation, I wrote a lot about computational psychiatry. Lots of work from Carl Freston, working on prior information, Bayesian brains, inference. When you look at those models, is that something you incorporate quite a bit in your work when you're working with emotional affective science, neuroscience, or are you approaching this from a different angle?
Yeah, it's actually very close. So I myself in training, I'm not a computational neuroscientist, but I do incorporate computational models and computational thinking. And I consider emotional behavior as algorithmic processes. So it's all about what the brain is computing and how we execute it. And we could use computational models to make prediction or to define very accurately what are the components of the learning and what the brain is processing.
When I was going through your work, something that I had the urge to ask you at some point was, within this, from circuits to consciousness, as I said, part two would be that in neuroscience, we're uncovering so much. Over the past few decades, we've figured out so many things. There are a few people trying to figure out the connectome. There are a few people trying to figure out what consciousness is. How close do you think that we are to connecting these mechanisms, neuroscience's understanding of emotional control and mechanisms of what we call subjective experience? Do you think we're able to encapsulate that within a neuroscientific approach?
Wow, biggest question of the field.
It's but the point of this podcast. At some point, we have to touch on it. The mind-body problem is
yes. So I do have kind of an optimistic response, but it's very, very early on. But what I can say is that we have made an effort to construct what we call the Human Affectome. And this is an algorithmic collection of all the components of affective phenomena in humans. So this, it's not a model or, a theory. It's actually a framework that just provides kind of a skeleton to incorporate all the theories, or actually a platform to create new theories. But it gives this fundamental description of what is an organism, what is the purpose of the organism, and in this way, what is the purpose of affect or emotion. And by answering this, we can incorporate many, many theories and explanations from the neurobiological level to consciousness. So it does include feelings and how feelings are incorporated into it. And considering feelings are the content of consciousness. So what we do is investigate the content of consciousness and the structure of that information. And from this, we can learn something about consciousness, why it exists and how it is organized. So I think actually by incorporating affect into consciousness can lead us a step further to understanding the link between the body, the brain, and the mind.
Daniela, are you familiar with the work done by Professor Mark Solms here in Cape Town at UCT, University of Cape Town?
Just by name, but what exactly are...
So it's interesting because what you're talking about with affective science combining with consciousness research, his theory of consciousness, he calls it the felt uncertainty principle. He works closely with people like Carl Friston, etc. But he wrote a book called The Hidden Spring. And it's pretty cool because basically what he tries to say is that feeling or affect is fundamentally what needs to be within consciousness, trying to understand what consciousness is. So he tries to take it back to the brainstem as the fundamental source of this feeling, because everything that we experience has to be felt. So affect forms a fundamental basis of what consciousness is, according to his theory of consciousness. I just thought I'd bring that up. Sorry, that's just a sidetrack. But with that being said, if someone asks you, Daniela, what is consciousness? Or how do you respond to that?
Yeah, I think it's a felt experience. It's kind of subjectively felt. It's felt, right? It's felt experience. That's kind of, I think, the main way to incorporate it. And I completely agree with that approach, because in a way, every felt experience has valence. And in this sense, affect is incorporated because there's we tend to separate cognition and affect as if, perception is affect free, but it's not. It's like every moment, every thought, every felt experience is valenced, even if it's close to zero or neutral or something. Kind of so that's a level of valence. I think these domains are very, very interconnected, and I think a great deal of what slowed us down is this like a division of fields and domains, and them being studied separately.
It's the cortical fallacy is what some people refer to it as. Just this obsession with the fact that this visual system has dominated us for so long. We must somehow incorporate this into every theory of consciousness. But you're right. I think that feeling, that felt experience, that subjective experience has to be incorporated into any theory of consciousness. And within these systems, I mean, us as feeling individuals or beings, it places us in an intriguing world. We're a social species. We have to interact. We have to engage. The social navigation becomes so important. And your lab has worked quite a bit on the social space, what you call. Can you tell me exactly what social navigation means for most people and how we can understand these complex human relationships within the social space?
So I think the easiest way to begin to understand it is think about spatial navigation, right? We walk in space and we do have the machinery in the brain to map the physical environment where we are in a particular place. So there are neurons, place cells, that fire in a particular location, or grid cells that fire regularly in a pattern that creates kind of a grid of the environment. And one idea is that it's not a machinery dedicated only to the physical space, but to organize information more generally. And in this sense, it can be also abstract information. It can be other sensory modalities. For example, you can navigate in auditory space or olfactory space whenever you have dimensions. And social space also has dimensions. So it's actually an excellent case of navigation, because if we take fundamental dimensions like power and affiliation, which is how much we get close to each other, and dominance, power relationships, these two components are fundamental for, you see it across species and in many psychological theories that describe relationships. So whenever we interact, first of all, interaction is required. It's not a snapshot of your network or, Facebook friends or something. When we interact, we establish that relationship or location of you relative to me, for example, on these two dimensions. And as the interactions continue, then there's a path created because people move in relative power and affiliation. So if you model it like that, you can now have coordinates, like real coordinates, and you can have a geometric structures and vectors and angles to this social space. And we theorized that, but then we found that the brain is indeed tracking that. We could see changes in the brain that track with the coordinates. And that, I think, also relates to survival and well-being, because social others are part of the environment, and the organism's work is existing in an environment and interacting with the environment to make sense of the environment and to survive.
Well, I mean, you briefly touched on this, but I mean, the fact that this is a two-dimensional experience you and I are experiencing right now with each other, we're moving closer and closer to that being a permanent version of reality with the way social media works today, how people are constantly stuck behind a screen, engaging online. How do you think this is changing or perhaps causing malfunctioning responses because of these new environments? How is this impacting our brains? Obviously, I'm not talking from a mental health perspective because you're not a psychiatrist, but actually from the neuroscientific research, what's happening?
Yeah, I think there's a misconception of what a relationship is. So if you, let's say, just read posts and post them yourself and you feel, let's say, your status is changing, that's a whole different thing. That these are not social interactions. And there's no movement. There's movement of maybe something else, like, one-dimensional liking status or something like that. But for a social space to be represented and for navigation in social space to occur, there has to be actual interactions, like one-on-one interactions that are not a one-time interaction. So in this sense, for example, let's say I know that someone is really powerful, I don't know, the president. So that president is not in my social space at the moment because we didn't interact. And actually, when we interact, that person, although I expected that person to have a lot of power, wouldn't necessarily, have it. Maybe we're like buddies and all that. So the interaction itself defines the location in the dimensions. So I think there's a lot of with social media, there's an illusion of interaction, and it doesn't have the benefits, and it's not encoded in the same way. So I don't have direct empirical evidence, but from what I see from my experiments, the tracking by the brain machinery of navigation, which is the hippocampus and related regions, only occurs when you actually interact, not when you hear social information or being passively engaged.
I think that's one of the things that surprise people most is when you show them the neuroscience behind what's different from an interaction in person versus what we experience. I think there were a few studies done years ago that show how we even perceive people differently. If someone puts on an outfit that, let's say they put on a costume of a beggar on the street, how much less certain parts of their brain react in response to even seeing them. So just a mere change of an outfit can dehumanize a person. So there's so many small things about reality that we don't really understand. And because of our heuristics, certain adaptations, processing power, very limited, it's quite scary to consider the fact that as a social species, we're becoming far less social. And yet we think we're more social than ever. Does that concern you?
Yes, it's very concerning because the illusion is very convincing. It's like, if you think about it, we have relationship with ourselves, right? And we can quite easily create mental representations of others in our brain and have interactions with that mental representation. So we do have it in real life because I do represent you in certain ways, like you said, depending on your outfit and how you behave and my prior knowledge. But I constantly update this based on the interaction. Mm-hmm. And ideally, I'm not captive in stereotypes and so forth. But this is all augmented in online interactions because of the limited information that you have. So you complement it a lot with your own mental model. And this is what you have interaction with. This like a whole bunch of fictional characters that you created in your mind, and you have interactions with them. And you also, you don't have a lot of information of how they perceive you, which is also very important input that you need to understand a relationship.
Daniela, when it comes to species interacting, we know that a lot of interactions can lead to permanent outcomes. So if someone gives you a traumatic childhood experience growing up, you'll always remember that experience as a fundamental life-changing one. We briefly touched on the fact that memory and malleability are very much interlinked. Do you think that someone risks, let's say you change a very traumatic memory, and we sort of use some sort of a strategy within psychiatry, whether it's myself as a doctor trying to work on someone with CBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, whatever, does that risk the person almost losing out on a core memory that perhaps would have otherwise led them down a different philosophical path? How do you see these people changing memories? Or that's a pretty deep question.
It's a very complicated ethical issue. Yeah. So we kind of, I think we all agree that memories shape us and make us who we are. And there is the concept of growth from trauma, that people become something they never imagined they would be. So that's a positive value kind of that arises from it. But then you wouldn't want to have trauma just because of that, right? So the thing about changing memories is bringing them to the adaptive range. The talk about modifying memories in the context of trauma is only when the memory makes you function less well. It's like some people, right, they suffer and they can't work and it ruins their social relationships. It's has a very serious price. And in this sense, you want to modify that memory such that you could function with the memory. So it's not about erasing, it's about living with it in a way that wouldn't interrupt with your daily function. And in many cases, you could remember the content. So it's not about erasing the content of the event. It's actually making sense of the content and then having the emotion a bit, I wouldn't say disconnected, but tolerable when you remember. Because all of these processes are the ones that interfere with the experience. Of course, one can take it into let's shape people's memories and modify, and it could go to these terrible scenarios. But I think this can happen with every science, and I don't think we're there yet because it's very subtle what we manage to understand and to modify.
Yeah, I think I think that's more for a Black Mirror episode at this point. It's very science fictiony to a point where people can postulate as much as they want, but the tech isn't there yet. But I mean, if we think about that differently, we can think of certain medications that do that within my field, let's say, and yet we still don't understand the basis of how these things work. So it is one of those fields where it's very touch and go. Daniela, when you look at someone experiencing something, whether it's a felt experience, a subjective core experience, do you find yourself seeing that more as a brain event or bodily event, or do you find that to be more of a psychological or a non-physical event?
All of the above. It's like I don't separate it at all, and also I think it's incredibly important not to break it down, because as I mentioned early on, it's always important to remember that who is experiencing. The entity that is experiencing is an organism. So the organism is not just the neural pathways or nervous system. It's the body, right? It's the entire thing. You have the sensory information coming to input to the body. And in addition to that, the organism is embedded in the environment. So it really matters where the organism is, because it changes, the relative survival ratio or whatever the organism will even compute. Also, the senses are important. Different animals have different senses. So even if they're in the same environment, they will each have a different environment depending on what they sense. And in addition to that, to have an environment, the organism has to operate. It has to interact with the environment, has to perceive it, which is an action in itself, and create the environment such that the organism could interact with it. So you see, it's a very iterative, convoluted process that incorporates all of these. There's the organism in its entirety and its interaction with the environment. All of these are the experience.
Yes. It's very similar to the approach taken by the 4E CogSci.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So embedded, embodied. Yes.
And the enacted and extended, the mere fact that we've got a cell phone,
exactly.
It forms part of who we are at this point. And without our cell phones, we're actually a lot dumber than we think we are. And we
yes.
think about it every day. Are there any parts, Daniela, when you guys are working in the lab, when you guys are doing your research, how often do you guys ponder the philosophical questions? I mean, like what is consciousness? What is free will? Do you guys ever sit down and discuss this? Is it something that comes up, or is that just for the couch philosophers at home?
Yeah, so surprisingly, we do it quite a lot.
Okay.
And so because we did write the Human Affectome. So Human Affectome is an exercise in incorporating philosophy into science. And it's also a really nice example of how philosophy really helps you organize what is it that you learn, even organize the field, and especially putting all the researchers on the same platform such that and also give them joint language such that they will be able to communicate. And because of that experience, we in our paper is that we had a table that expands kind of all the components of assumptions that go into scientific research, like metaphysical assumptions, pragmatic considerations, also theoretical virtues. What is it that you yourself perceive as a good theory? So that all these something like 7 rows. And we put the affective field into that. So the exercise we started doing with the graduate students is have them fill out this table, basically identify their different assumptions, philosophical assumptions, mechanistic, operationalization, construct, pragmatic, and do that in their own field, in their own thesis topic. And that was a really wonderful experience because it's a simple exercise, but it kind of fundamentally change how you think of your research. It really helps you organize. It also helps you communicate, and also makes you aware of many things you took for granted or either didn't think about, or once you think about it, really enlightens your understanding of what you do. So I'm a really big fan of incorporating philosophy into science, and this year we're going to do the course again. And maybe we'll write something to share, the syllabus with other people if they're interested.
I think that's a brilliant approach. I think it's very underrated within science. When you do that, you realize the normativity and the amount of biases and fallacies we have when we think about our own field. And you're right, it gives us that common language to sort of dissect what we're talking about, how we're discussing it, why we have the similar bias that we might have, and then move beyond it. So I do think it's almost like a tool for science, and it can only augment it.
Yes, it's like once you do it, you can't believe you didn't do it before. And it's like, how did we even survive without it? So I do hope we will do it more and more, and we'll be more aware of it. Another nice benefit is that sometimes when you think there are competing theories, or I don't know, maybe you have like a nemesis theory, you actually don't argue at all because you really study different things. So there's no competition whatsoever. Yeah. You're actually really complementing each other. So that really changes also the kind of social dynamics in the field.
Speaking of those social dynamics, when you look at the field of neuroscience right now and your work and the work people like you are doing in the field, is there anything in particular that excites you right now? It's 2025. There's so much going on. We're exponential growth in neuroscience research. What excites you the most?
Wow, there's a lot. So, well, one thing is that from my experience, we started doing, but people have been doing for quite a while now, is studying the human brain with intracerebral recordings, because we have access with epilepsy patients that while they're being waiting for it. So epilepsy patients, they will come to the hospital and kind of stay there for about a week. They will have electrodes implemented and wait for a seizure to happen. And this helps the neurosurgeon identify the source of the seizure and then map it and target it in an invasive procedure later on. But for a few days, they're just there with electrodes in their brain. And so they volunteer to do some studies. And that gives us really unparalleled access to the human brain, something that we could just do with animals. But the added value of doing it in humans is that now you can do things like the social navigation, and you can look at just them talking, natural language, even interacting. So this is just kind of, you don't see a lot of that. It's the beginning, but this is very exciting. And you can combine that or do it separately with virtual reality and augmented reality. So experiments become more and more naturalistic and closer to the real life experience, which is very important, especially in relation to trauma. For example, we had a study where we asked people with PTSD to listen to a recording that describes their own personal trauma versus a regular memory. So you can imagine someone is in the fMRI scanner, and we can look at the brain while they listen to something like that, someone just talking but describing a personal experience. Then we can compare it to non-personal experience and all sorts. But it's very, very naturalistic, and it's their own personal memory. And this is something you couldn't study before, because what we do, usually we bring everybody to the lab and they all have the same experience, which is very controlled, like looking at a stimulus on a computer, making that stimulus scary, but it's all very controlled and organized. But really what you're interested in is the personal trauma. So now we can begin to see how it gives us access to that. And because we have these sophisticated also analytical methods and machine learning, and we have ways now to manage complicated data and massive data. And we just begin kind of to see the use of it in science. So I think that's really exciting. That's why I said because I could just imagine, like many studies now for the next 10 years.
Back when you started, did you ever think that AI would begin to assist neuroscience in the way it has in the last few years?
No, not at all. It's like I didn't even imagine that. It was really just the plain old science with control conditions and simple conditions and clean, out of any. It's kind of interesting because there's a phenomenon of interest, and what you do in one approach is kind of strip everything out of it, such that you can isolate it and look at it. And now what we do is really tuck it in the mess of life. But if we do manage to track it, or we believe it exists, like, for example, that computation that I mentioned, like geometric structure of social navigation, we should be able to track it out of all the mess. So it actually, if it exists, it should arise with all of this noise, because it's order in the noise. So I find it very, very compelling. And I still think that there's room for both, right? There's like the classic way and kind of the new way. I also see many students, which is very nice to see, that they combine advisors. So they have like advisors that do like more naturalistic stuff, and then the more kind of conservative advisors that do the more organized stuff, because they themselves see that you do need both. You do need the very clear and organized and analytical thinking of an experimental design, but also the flexibility and, I guess, somewhat creativity of incorporating the experience. Another thing that is important is that we used to think that to translate animal work to human work, it has to be exactly the same. And that had a lot of problems, because it's very hard for it to be exactly the same. So even with fear conditioning, where you have a stimulus paired with, let's say, an electric shock, and you do it in animals and in humans, still humans, they have expectations. They are really influenced by the context. They kind of overthink. They're really influenced by the instructions that you give them. So it will never be identical. But I think if there's a principle of, let's say, navigation, you could find it in humans in a whole different way. But it will still be exactly the same computation. You just arrive at it from the human experience. So it doesn't have to be exactly identical, as long as what you really isolate is the computation itself, or the representation that you're trying to capture.
When we think of these, I mean, it's these soft skills that almost separate us from machines at this point. When you think about how far it's come and where it's going, do you think we'll ever reach a point where some sort of an electrical or silicon system can reach the complexity of a brain? I mean, it's 2% of our body's mass, and yet 20% of our body's energy is consumed. At what point will a system be able to do that at a more efficient rate and sort of produce these experiences similar to us? Do you think that's possible, firstly? And what are your thoughts on when that might happen, if so?
Yeah, well, there are the technical aspects of it that, the current systems, they just get heated, and that's a big problem. I know that there's, nanophotonics. It's supposed to be much more effective in terms of, saving this like temperature problem. So maybe something will be there. But in terms of, I don't know if you're asking about something that is more similar to the brain, it might have to be, with organic matter. Or if we want to talk about conscious machines, as long as they're not embedded in the environment and have to produce their own material like an organism, there will always be kind of this fundamental barrier between considering what is conscious and what not.
Yeah, I think that some people call it mortal computation. It's sort of the fact that we will die and we have to sort of live to we have to do things within this universe to survive and keep ourselves alive and thrive, is a fundamental part of being a conscious being at this point. And most systems don't have that, or most mechanistic ones.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that this is the question of purpose that I mentioned early on. This is what the organism is doing, and this is where you find kind of consciousness and affect and the content of consciousness. It's exactly for that, to exist, to reproduce your own material, to be independent, a separate unit from the environment, but interacting with the environment. And whatever you do is for the sake of continuing to be. Right? And for this, you have representations of the environment, and you can have abstraction, which is this added ability that we can find, more confidently in humans, maybe in other animals as well, which really expands your field of relevance of what you can interact within the environment. These are kind of all levels of evolution. But so these are. This is where you find consciousness. It's like for that purpose, you could say. So if we don't have it in machine, then I think it will be difficult to conclude that it's similar to conscious organism. But I don't know. It's a really complicated debate. So.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things that keep me up at night. One of the other things would be free will. What the channel explores that quite thoroughly. What are your thoughts on that from a neuroscience perspective? Do you believe, I mean, I know it's a complicated question, and even asking if do we have free will is quite simplistic. But when you think about will, freedom of choice, and just having this, what do you think about free will?
It's funny. It's like everybody, come with their own little solution to the most complicated. The problem is that if you think you have a solution, you probably don't understand the problem, right? So you're always risking it. But I think there's something to do with probabilities. I guess it's a weird thing to say, but there's a problem with determinism, right? That there's one thing leads to another, and therefore we don't have free will. It's all determined. But we do find situations in the world where I call it like the land of equal probabilities, where equal, it's but you still need to make a choice. So I'm just I'm wondering if the fact that we make a choice from equal landscape of probabilities is the sense of free will, or so it's a sort of but it's really just like my science fiction theory, right? That's where I stand. But I think I would be curious to see where it goes in terms of choosing from, because that's the kind of the essence of free will, right? The fact that you have a choice.
But growing up in Israel, did you find that you always wanted to be a neuroscientist? Was that something that was always on your mind, or was that something that just happened while delving into the philosophy of mind over time?
I don't know who is a person that really plans their future. I don't think it exists really. It's just in retrospect. And sometimes it seems like everything was planned because one thing builds on another. It's just so nicely crafted, but it's absolutely not. It's you really take it day by day. In each stage, I had no idea if and how I will survive the next, and whether it would lead to anything else. It's not like I had a world view of I want to study this and that. Just every moment I was interested in something, and I think because you follow your passion, then you are consistent. You see, you're not first consistent. It's you just do whatever at the moment is the most important to you, and because it's you, and you do have some passions and interests, then one thing leads to another and become a very coherent, actually, path. But I was really interested in astronomy and astrophysics. That was my passion as a child, and I always thought I would go in that direction. There was no science like space program or something when I grew up. So I just, I found myself sort of in the field of neuroscience, which was like the next best thing, in terms of being complicated. In retrospect, it does reflect what I was always curious about. But if you just follow your passion, you'll find your path, as opposed to plan your path ahead of time.
We're exactly the same in that, because when I was younger, that's the same thing that happened to me. I wanted to be an astrophysicist, and then eventually found myself going down the route of mental health and medicine. And then because I felt like the mind or studying the brain would be the closest thing to that, which is strange because it's far from it, but yet it is. It's fundamentally a universe in itself.
Yeah. I mean, I think I did have at least one philosophical approach that I was aware of early on, which is how I treated fear. Because my interest in fear was related to freedom, because I just felt it's very limiting. You're trapped in your fear and also trapped in memories. So I found or thought that overcoming fear is really about liberation, kind of just removing obstacles. So that's how I treated fear. Speaking of free will, you don't want something to dictate. It's like something external that dictates whatever you do. So it's really about freedom.
And has that changed over the years, or do you still find that sort of liberation when you talk about breaking away from fear and like helping people with that, with your work and research?
Yes, it even expanded because now it goes to everything. It's about our emotions and about our memories. So I did have a fundamental change in how I think about memories, because you grow up thinking that memories are who you are, and you don't even doubt them. It's just a story that you're stuck with, and it's like repeating. You always have this like memory in mind, and it's who you are, and it's your life experience. And now it's like it's nothing at all, because first of all, it's a choice. Whatever you remember is a choice, and how you remember it is a choice, and also it's a possibility. It's not. You're not entirely sure that this is what happened. So in a way, just like you predict the future, you almost like predict the past. You have an hypothesis about the past. So it's an option now. So it's not self-defining anymore. And also the fact that emotions are information in a way, and also they could be flexible, then you also start having a relationship with your memory and with your emotion, as opposed to just operating at every given moment. If you have a memory, then it gives you information. It's like, why do I remember it now? It actually tells you a lot about your situation now, as opposed to what actually happened before. That's the most important information that it gives you. And emotions, it's like, if you're afraid, it's like, because people can say, but I can't do it because I'm afraid. And that's it, It's like, no, but it's not. You can still have a relationship with that fear, right? You can, you don't necessarily have to feel like that, or you can do something despite of that. So all of these like self-defining aspects of your life are not defining anymore. And in a way, you become this free spirit, kind of liberated creature that you kind of create yourself every moment in a way by interacting with these entities.
Yeah, it's crazy, because when you think about when people talk about prior information dictating the posterior outcomes or conclusions, what you're saying is almost like it's actually we have these posterior conclusions that we keep making that actually dictate the posterior conclusions. So there's choices all the way down. It never stops. Yeah. And at every point we want to stop and actually ask another question, we can fundamentally change the conclusion in an instant, actually. Or maybe not in an instant, over time at least.
Yeah, and also another thought I had that is also a more recent insight of sorts is that, so first you have the story of your life, right? And then the next stage is like, well, maybe it's not the story of my life, right? You can start to doubt the story, and you kind of see that it's modifiable and it's flexible. It's not the absolute truth. And you really learn about the moment and who you are now and what you need. And then the next stage is not committing to any story. It's actually living with multiple stories. And I have kind of a pet theory, like with the consciousness and the free will, that it's actually very adaptive to have a wide range of options. So the more stories you have about yourself or the possibilities, the better. Because if you just commit to one storyline, it's very restrictive. You have like 2 or 3, it's fine. But it's like at any given moment, it's like you treat everything as like possibilities, and one is like more probable or more coherent or makes sense or something. But you're kind of very flexible with that too.
Yeah, and that makes sense, because when you think of certain theories that were told back in the day, when you think about certain narcissists or pathological liars, and you see how prior to the invention of proof or like photography, videography, you could get away with so much. And it was often a trait that helped them evolutionary to get through lots of things. You could lie your way through anything. There was no form of evidence out there. People weren't keeping track. And then over time, as digital media progressed, as there's proof, as we have notes and prior information, now it's actually not working as much. But you can tell how having that ability to almost lie on demand, being able to be malleable as a character, be a chameleon, do whatever you need to do, would actually benefit you in so many ways, because you can literally get into a different country, pretend like you're from there. And just lie.
But there's a caveat. So I'm glad you gave that example, because it's not what I meant so I'm glad you went there, so that now I can clarify.
Right.
So it's not about inventing your life as you go. It's actually, I believe that this is how you become the most authentic and true to yourself. You see, I mean, there's still a you there, that because there's still the you that have the interaction with the memory. It's just the only thing I'm saying is that it doesn't, it's not forced upon you anymore, or it becomes information rather than a ready-made, or because you never chose it in a way. If you just have your storylines, like my childhood was like this, and this one did this to me, and then that's what I am now. Now it's like, well, maybe not, or maybe I can look at it differently, or maybe now I have more information, or maybe I can find a way not to be afraid. You see, you just like become more like an artist with a lot of material.
Yeah, it's kind of like a reframe. It's kind of like reframing, because it's almost like uncaging yourself and remembering that a lot more has actually happened to you. Let's say the day that you had a traumatic experience, there might have been the most beautiful sunset that occurred the same night. And you could always rewire that into a different thought. Like, okay, that day was more about this beautiful sunset. Or am I close to a bit what you're talking about? Or
because what I want to say is that it's not less true.
Yeah.
So unlike the confabulating person, I mean, that person doesn't have even a stable self, right? It's like you don't know who that person is. They're just like moment by moment. Yeah. Actually, they are they're like changing by the moment, depending on the moment, and I'm talking about actually resisting that. You see, because it's like you're not your emotions. Your emotions are not something that are just there. It's like, I have this emotion. You see, you sort of free yourself, and now you have like a lot of choice, or at least you interact with it, as opposed to just like floating.
It's almost like you're not detaching from yourself, but you're detaching from that moment rather. So unlike the confabulator or the psychopath, you're not becoming new people each time, but you're aligning your stories to parts that you kind of want to go on, and that have actually happened, and you're just navigating through that territory rather than the one that brought you down.
Yeah. I think I like to think about it. I like the artist example, because it's like you just have more material to work with to shape your life.
Is it ever then a concern that you get so caught up in the artwork you forget what the canvas looked like when it started?
I think not, because I think this process actually makes your core stronger. because you access the core, which is the thing, that interacts with all the things and consider them, and also it's not a lot of. It sounds very cerebral, but it's not entirely like that. It's really about like music, when you sort of improvise and you have like a way to kind of so you listen and then you go in a certain way, but you keep listening and then you go in another way.
Like jazz in that regard.
Yeah, it's more like that.
Tell me, Daniela, within this field, such a diverse, neuroscience is such a diverse field. A lot of people don't realize it. I mean, it forms bases of so many different things. It can be economics, it can go down to the subatomic level, it can go into chemistry, whatever. Which parts about neuroscience or the brain are you most passionate about right now? And what are you most looking forward to in the future of neuroscience?
I'm excited about, the mind. So I would say mental actions, because I'm kind of leaning toward a view that really merges cognition and affect. So I wouldn't say I'm interested in affect. It's really about this subjective experience or felt experience, and you have these different components. So it's really all of the above. So there's the neurobiological. There's actually, even before that, the very physical network of an organism, which is like how units interact and produce material. So it's like these very basic systems. And then on top of that, you start to have the mental actions, which is perception, attention, sensory information. It's like the components. And layered on it is affect, which is the experience of the entire organism. So in a way, the cognitive processes that we studied them separately now are the components that comprise the agent as a whole. And the agent as a whole has this like global computation that can then constrain the cognitive aspect. So for example, if you have the concern of threat, if you go back to fear as an organism, it will constrain all of your processes. So you will perceive things differently. You will be attuned to different types of information in a different way. All of your body and processes are adjusted. So you can think about it as like these global computations versus local computations, and they're all interacting. So I would say I'm looking forward to working in that more global interactive space where the different researchers are communicating, because they're all in the same context, of the organism in these particular affective states. And the affective states are inseparable. They're not like this additional process, sparkled on a cognitive process. It's just considering the entire organism, a computation that has the agent as the carrier of the computation.
Yeah, it's and when you think about this felt experience, I mean, this feeling of reality, and I mean, because it's easy to think of someone thinking or having a thought, but feeling, I mean, we're always doing that. We feel our way through everything. Which other species do you think, if it was not a human brain that you were studying now, what would be the next best brain you'd love to sort of get your hands on, you could possibly want to study, that you find intrigues you most, except for a human?
Yeah, I think there's actually more that we don't know. I read this book, like, many people read it from Ed Young, This Immense World. It's mind-boggling, and it's a little bit even scary what you kind of find in these like different other options of consciousness. I read like this little actually title that like some people really like cockroaches and they think they're like way more intelligent and they can like even look at you, So I think we don't know a lot, but it's like from what we know, I'm really curious about actually the very social species, like elephants. I think are just like amazing, and dolphins. Well, octopuses now we also know a lot more. So yeah, all the things that you can have like a relationship with, and you feel there's someone there. Well, dogs, obviously. So yeah, these would be my first choice. Will be an elephant, I think.
And I think that's one of the nice things about having feeling or affect as a more core principle within this framework you're talking about, is because it sort of allows us to have more species on the hierarchy, let's say evolutionary, because we often just anything without a cortex, we're done with it. But actually, when you think about it, a lot of species can feel their way through reality without a prefrontal cortex, without any cortical aspects as well. So even though we might not understand the way an octopus works or anything without a cortex, there's a chance the thing is still feeling its way through reality. So we're giving more things consciousness with that approach, in essence.
Yeah. And I wouldn't necessarily separate thoughts and feelings. Everything, when you have a thought, it's a felt state. So it's a felt experience. I think in this way, the more I dived into affect, the more it seems like actually encompassing actually all of cognition. So it become less, more and more kind of inclusive of everything, and became something else, not another process, but that global process that I mentioned.
Daniela, if you had to have a sort of a Mount Rushmore of favorite neuroscientists, who would they be? Who inspired you most, or who do you recommend people check out, except for yourself, of course?
I had, geez, you caught me there. I have to think about it.
Oh, no pressure. Does anyone who inspires you, people you think about, people who maybe got you into it? I know one of mine is Oliver Sacks. He's someone I really love. And actually, like, probably one of the reasons why I do this podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with Oliver Sacks. I'm assuming you
are. Yeah, I mean, he's amazing. He, as a person that sees the humanity in people. It's just like I feel like I'm inspired on a daily basis from many, also from physicists and mathematicians.
Okay, so let's broaden that. Let's make it like, who are the scientists or philosophers who've inspired you or shaped your worldview to a point where they really shaped your career and who you are?
I have to think about it.
It's fine.
Okay. It's like a great many, and kind of it's hard to choose, but it's like I feel I have an answer for that, but I want to think about it more deeply.
That's completely fine. If any recommended reading though, Daniela, do you think that if someone's looking to get into this field, do you think that you can think of any books that you'd recommend people who want to fall in love with neuroscience and just falling in love with the mind in general? Is that something you also need some thoughts?
Well, I think Oliver Sacks definitely will be top of the list. And I really look up to my postdoc commenter, Joseph Ledoux. He's like one of the founding fathers of the emotional brain. And I think, he would definitely be a person that inspired me a lot, because he's very poetic about how he views the brain and emotion. He keeps evolving. He has an amazing way of expressing himself. He's also a musician, so it's very pleasant to read what he writes, almost like listening to music. There's this like lightness, but extreme depth. And I think he did a lot. He pretty much one of the first few that started shaping the field of the emotional brain and emotional neuroscience, and brought us where we are now. I would say I would recommend him. He has several books, very recent ones. He's also working on a memoir. I think there's more to read, and now he's really dealing with consciousness. So for him, also emotion led him to consciousness. So I would start with him, and I would say he's definitely one of the scientists that inspired me most.
Nice. And Daniela, just to round off, what work should we look out for from your lab in the future that's really exciting you at the moment? And then from there, we'll slowly round off.
I'm excited about where the social space will take us in terms of the neural mechanisms. If we can dig more and more to find neurons and how they encode this navigation in abstract space. So we're heading there. And also more into naturalistic experiences of threat and fear and trauma. And to use, I'm going to use language models and more sophisticated machine learning based analysis to analyze naturalistic behavior, especially related to fear.
Daniela, was there anything about your work in general that you feel you've always wanted to talk about or never got the chance to really express and tell people with excitement that perhaps you'd like to, or do you feel that I might have not asked about that's really cool and people should know about?
Yeah, I think the reconsolidation aspect, we didn't mention that word, but modifying memories and navigating social space. I think now I'm also starting to merge them to see how the affect is incorporated into the social space, or social behavior is a form of affective experience that needs to be modified and updated. So it's about identifying these core memories and then finding a way to modify them and then track the change. And I think the Human Affectome, which we published just recently, I'm very excited about that and want to see where it will lead us. And I hope it will be useful for the field.
I'll definitely put a link to that below as well. Thank you so much, Daniela. I really appreciate your time. Before we end, is there anything about the brain if you were to conclude this, what is the one thing you'd like to tell people about the brain that they should know and remember at the end of this conversation? Or the human experience with your knowledge in mind?
Yeah, I would say the most interesting aspect that people should be aware of is the malleability of it, the flexibility of it, and the degree of choice that we have. So breaking free from the self-defining memories and emotional patterns and starting to interact with them to find who you are underneath.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Daniela. Really appreciate your time. This was an absolute pleasure, and you keep up the great work. You guys are incredible, and it's always a pleasure to watch you guys from the outside and see the incredible work that's being put out. So keep it up, and thank you from my side.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It was a great conversation.